All right, everybody, welcome to Studio B. I am your host, Pastor MDH. Thank you so very much for joining us here on the set today. Remember, wherever you're watching us from, Facebook, Instagram, used to make sure that you like, follow, comment, subscribe. Get all in them comments. Let me know. Thank you for all the interaction over the last few podcasts. We praise God for your followership and your viewership. I'm here on the set of Studio B. We got it's been a very, very good 2 years. We've recently just passed the 12,000 subscriber mark, which is a blessing. Thanking God for all of you guys who join us every week, our 10-minute table talks and such. But we got some things here that I'm trying to process. My issue would be time and how that would all allocate to. But we got some things that are on the table and want you guys to continue to look forward for some new and upcoming events here on the podcast. But today, we had last week, Miss Sabrina Noble talking about finances in the personal realm. And if you've been watching us for any length of time, you know that we spend not a lot of time, but we spend significant time on talking about personal issues such as finance. And I want to ask you guys a question. And it's not, it may sound insulting to when I say it, but just give me some time and let me flesh this out. My question is, can people add? Like 1 + 1 is 2. Basic addition, basic math. I'm not talking about trigonometry. I'm not talking about algebra 2. I'm talking about basic math. 1 + 1 is 2. I had a conversation a couple of weeks ago with some very, very good friends of mine. And let me preface this by saying I talk about in-depth politics with people who oftentimes don't share the same belief as I do. Not oftentimes, but I do have a lot of friends who do not share the same political affiliation and have the same viewpoints that I do. But we engage in very deep conversations. It's never emotional. It's never a shouting match. These are very well thought out ideas that we can discuss around the table. I try my best to limit my political conversations to areas where I will come out better and informed, because I'm hoping that through dialogue and through mutual respect, I may be able to gain a vantage point that I previously did not have. And so I got to be very, very particular in doing that, because emotion runs rampant with a lot of people, and it can quickly get out of control. So there are two things that will send everybody off of the radar, and that's religion and politics. So you got to be very, very careful about how you engage in them. But with that said, our conversation a couple of weeks ago was this: why do I, Marcus Dwayne Holman Sr., why do you, the viewers of Studio B, the citizens of America, why do I have to live, we have to live within the confines of the money we make? We have to live within the borders of what our budget affords us to do. So if we want to do something, take a trip, do this, do that, we, average everyday citizens, have to look at our finances and then ask the question, does our finances allow us to do what we want to do? And most of us who are logical will look at those numbers, look at our plans, and do one or two things. We can adjust our plans to fit the budget, or we can scrap the plans altogether. But for most of us, we have to live within the confines of our budget. We can't spend what we don't have. We just can't. They expect that from us. But it is not the same with our U.S. government. It is not the same with our U.S. government. I'm going to read a couple of op-eds here, and I want you to understand that no one can forgive debt. Debt has to be paid. Debt is what's called a rollover expense. Somebody has to pay it. In this year alone, 2022, we sent $47 billion to Ukraine. That was in March and April of this year, all the way into May. 47 billion with the B. We just now passed a $720 billion Inflation Reduction Act. And now we are going to forgive college debt from $10,000 up to $20,000. My question to some really good friends of mine who are very savvy in the financial industry is asking the question, where is this money coming from? Where is it coming from? Anybody who knows anything about inflation will tell you that the only reason for inflation is overspending of government. That is the only reason. You can peel back the potato and get all of these other pseudo reasons, but the number one reason for inflation is overspending. It is flooding the market with liquidity. It is printing more money than what the money has value to produce. It is flooding the market with liquidity, which dumbs down the dollar, which also lowers your trading expenses. That's inflation. Inflation right now, everybody, according to yesterday's information, is 9.7%. If that doesn't shock you, let me give you a little bit of a framework. Normal inflation is 3.5 to 3.8. Within the last 60 years, inflation at the highest point has been at a 4.1. At the highest point over the last 60 years, we are now at over 9, almost 10% inflation. And here's what that means to you. At a 10, let's just keep it at a very base level. At a 10% inflation, take every $100 that you have and take $10 away from it. So you got 90. And that does not include taxes. That don't include FICA. That don't include anything that normally comes out of your check. Take $10 off every $100 that you make right off the bat. Inflation is killing us. And yet we are producing money like it's going out of style. We are simply reproducing money to no end. And here's my question. Who's going to hold the government responsible for all of this money that is being printed? And please hear me. And I'm not going to go off on a tangent. I'm going to read all of this that I have. OK, I'm going to read it all. But here's my fear. And I'm going to say something. I'm not a prophet, nor do I claim to be one. If I can see within the next 50 to 75 years, America becoming subservient to another nation, dominated by another nation. I want to show you some things that you can find on .gov. All of this information that I'm getting ready to share with you is absolutely accessible to you. Here's the problem that I have. I am 49 years old this year. God has allowed me to do a lot in this life. This country has been terribly kind to me, has allowed me to receive a quality education and provide a quality way of life for me and my family. I praise God for where I am. I really do. I have a blessed life. I am thankful to God about all the things that he has afforded me. I have a real fear, and it is a real fear, that my kids, who are now 22, 21, 20, and 18 respectfully, in 20 years are not going to have the same advantages that I've enjoyed. When previous generations started at the bottom, worked their way through all of this persecution and hardship so that their future generations would be able to enjoy a lifestyle that was not privileged to them. We are heading in the direction right now to where that's going to be reversed. Our kids, my kids, your kids, my grandchildren, my future grandchildren, and your grandchildren are going to have to foot this bill. My kids are not going to be able to afford a house in 30 years, in 20 years. They're not going to be able to get a 3.5 interest rate on a mortgage. They're not going to do that. In 20 years, it's going to be commonplace for a mortgage rates to be at between 8 and 10%. And that's going to be commonplace. That's going to be commonplace because you have to understand how money works in order for you to understand why this is such an issue, why this overspending is such an issue. So this is a op-ed at coal.house.gov. You can find this on your own. It's been very well researched. It was actually researched by Barner and the House Finance Committee, the Senate Finance Committee. All of them have done research about this particular spending, and I'm going to go through this, okay? You know it's bad when Bernie Sanders Bernie Sanders, the one that wants to give everybody all kinds of money, when Bernie stands up on the House floor and says, this is ridiculous. When Bernie Sanders says that spending is ridiculous, you got a problem. So I want you to see this. This is on code.house.gov. You can find this on your own. And this is it's titled Biden's Budget. And here's what it says. Last week, President Joe Biden submitted to Congress his budget proposal for the fiscal year of 2023, which starts in November. And it plainly states that his funding and priorities and goals. Like all presidential financial budgets, it's simply a request and is not enforceable by law. In fact, several policies recommended in this budget stand no chance of passing both in the chambers of the House or the Senate. Unfortunately, this has a lot of what we call pork. So what he did was he submitted his financial budget for the fiscal year of 2023 with a price tag of $5.8 trillion. That's the budget that he submitted. He said in the fiscal year of 2023, this government is going to need $5.8 trillion to enact all of the policies and programs that I want to do in my administration. Watch this. That means that this budget proposal would spend $73 trillion over the next 10 years, a 66% increase from the 10 previous presidencies combined. I want you to think about this. So he said my fiscal budget for 2023 is $5.8 trillion, which amounts to $73 trillion spent over the next 10 years. 66% increase. A 66% increase. Now, I want you to think about this, everybody. If you got bad credit and you go try to get a credit card, no credit card is going to give you a credit card because they say that you don't pay back your old debts. You can't get an American Express if you got an outstanding balance with Capital One. Like if you're behind on your payments, that shows up on your credit report. If you don't pay your bills on your car note, they come and get your car. Like this is what America does. Like this is checks and balances. If we're doing this and we're saying just spend it all up and don't worry about paying it back, where does it end? If a $5.8 trillion budget over 2023 alone is going to equate to $73 trillion over the next 10 years, trillion, not billion, trillion with a T, trillion with a T, not a B. Over the next 10 years is a 66% increase. This would be the highest sustained level of government spending in American history and would also lead to the highest levels of deficit ever in the history of our country. In the 220 plus years of our country, this particular budget that he produced to the House will be the highest sustained government spending ever. Ever. And why aren't we up in arms about this? Why aren't you calling your local senator, your local representatives from the House and saying, we ain't got no money to fund that? Where's that money coming from? Listen, I got friends that live in California. God bless their soul. But I have a friend that lives in California who works in Silicon Valley, who makes a pretty decent coin. Here's what he shared with me a couple of months ago, and we were talking. We was on a Zoom call for a financial summit that's going to be coming up in 2023. He says, Pastor Holman, listen, whatever your yearly salary is in California, you cut that in half because with government, state, and all of the taxes that come out of California, 49% of my income goes to taxes. 49%. Of his income, of his yearly income goes to taxes, 49%. He's basically working for half of the money. But this would be something that would be outlandish and nobody's talking about it. Nobody's talking about this stuff. Nobody's saying, hold on, pump the brakes. Because listen, I want to do a whole lot of stuff right now, but I got 3 kids in college that I'm personally paying for. Me and Mama are making some sacrifices right now in the short term so that we can get our ducks in a row to do what we want to do in the next 5 years. So we have to budget. We have to allocate. I got to move money from here and put it over here in this pot because I understand that this is the money that I'm working with. Now, if I have a pot of gold at the end of this rainbow, I can do whatever I want to do, but I don't have that luxury. I have to be prudent because I understand when I get paid on this day, that's the money that I'm working with. That allows me to do what I want to do. And if I don't have enough money to do it, then we have to put forth a plan to make that plan come to pass. That's what normal people have to do, except when it comes to our government. This year, matter of fact, this Barna poll came out in June of this year that said that there's only 16% of Americans that believe that Congress is doing a good job. 82% of Americans believe that Congress is corrupt and are doing things for their own benefit. 82% say that Congress is out for themselves with no regard for the American public by which put them in office. This claim a budget would reduce our national debt. President Biden says this claim budget will reduce our national debt and it would lead to an accumulation of $16 trillion in new public debt and $1.1 trillion in yearly debt interest payments by 2032. If you look at this $720 billion Inflation Reduction Act, which I have looked at, I'm not talking out the side of my ear, $380 billion of that money goes to Green New Deals. The $720 billion Inflation Reduction Act would increase taxes on oil and gas. But it's supposed to be an Inflation Reduction Act. I want you to see what this is. This is all in the bill. And everybody, you can go to .gov and see all of this stuff. You can pull it up for yourself. Do your own research. Don't take Pastor Holman's word on this. Do your own research about this. Get in there and start digging under the dirt, figuring out what's going on. At the time when inflation this is my own little part that I'm putting in here. At a time when inflation is costing the average household nearly $3,500 extra a year. I went to the grocery store at Kroger's yesterday, to do my groceries. When she got through ringing up and I didn't get anything extraordinary, y'all. I didn't, grocery list. When she tallied everything up, $227. $227. Now, grant you this. I got 3 kids that are not in the house. So I'm not feeding 6 people anymore. I got 3 kids that are in college. So I'm not feeding. The basket is not to sustain 6 people in the house. The basket is to sustain 3 people in the house now. $227 when she hit the subtotal button. And I'm going to tell you something, it really kind of caught me by surprise. She said, well, do you have your Kroger's card? I said, yeah, I forgot. Put my number in. It went from 217 down to 227 down to 217. Took $10 off. $217 for groceries for 3 people. And I'm not talking about crab and salmon and all the fancy stuff. Yeah, I'm talking groceries to help you live. Breakfast, lunch, dinner. Cost me $217 and the basket wasn't even overflowing. I had one of those little carts. $217 is costing the average family $3,500 a year more than it was 2 years ago. Now watch this, $3,500 more when your salary has not increased. Your salary hasn't gone up, but it's costing you nearly $3,500 more because of inflation and all of this out of control spending. And my question is simply this: why are we tolerating this? You see it on the news. Well, they just passed a $720 billion infrastructure deal, and you turn to the next station. Oh, okay, we passed another bill. We sent $44 billion to Ukraine. Oh, okay, no problem. And we just kind of put it in the rear view, out of sight, out of mind. Now watch this. Now this is not, I was going to do a whole separate podcast on this, but I'll put this in here. The IRS has hired 87,000 new IRS agents. The NRG Stadium here in Houston, Texas, where the Houston Texans play, holds a capacity of 62,000 people. The IRS just hired 87,000 new IRS agents and has equipped them to carry weapons. Look it up for yourself. Do your own research. Biden's budget outlined that he wants to collect $58 trillion in taxes over the next 2 years. An additional $58 trillion in taxes over the next 2 years. So how is all of this going to be funded? You got it. They're going to take more money from you and they're going to take more money from me. In the budget, which is laid out clearly for anybody to see, the way that we pay for $720 billion, the way we pay for $44 billion to Ukraine is by taxing people who are already overtaxed. And if you know anything about totalitarianism, if you know anything about socialism, when taxes go up, when people begin to pay absorbent amount of taxes, it ruins the economy, because that's when you start getting all these side deals and people do not want to report. That's one. But then that leads to anarchy. Mr. Bernie Sanders said in his address to the House on May the 17th that there is a growing number of Americans that believe that they should take up arms to defend themselves against the tyranny of this Congress. Bernie said that. Bernie said that. And yet we are just allowing this to go on without any type of consequence. Now, I went to college. I'm 49 years old. I didn't pay off my college debt until I was 38. I'm talking, no, excuse me. No, I didn't. No, 42. 42 is when I paid the last payment. That means that was almost 16 years of payments, 17 years of payments. Pay a little bit here, pay a little bit extra over here when I can. I'm paying for my child's education right now, which are very expensive, by the way. Very expensive, by the way. Because I'm responsible like that. That if I rack up a debt, I believe that it's incumbent upon me, not you, to pay the debt that I racked up. So I don't go into a restaurant and eat food and then walk out, because that's my bill. That's my bill. I don't walk out the door and say, hey, the person over there, take care of my bill. No, that's my bill. It's my responsibility to take care of it. So what are we doing by releasing debt? And if you're going to release college debt, release credit card debt. Wipe out everybody's credit card debt. Oh, that would be a blessing. American Express wouldn't like it too much, but that would be a blessing. Capital One, Discover wouldn't like it too much, but if you're going to wipe out debt, then wipe out debt. Instead of wiping out debt, have these colleges issue refunds back to these students for absorbing college expenses. But here's what we're doing. We're saying you make the bill, somebody else is going to pay. We get to enjoy all the benefits of your hard work. No, that's not how life works, everybody. And if you are governing your life by racking up bills that you are not paying, that's called irresponsibility. God don't bless that, because a good name is better than precious rubies. So if we're going to be putting this stuff out there, if we're going to be doing this, we have to understand how these numbers work. And everybody, this is a democracy, or supposed to be a democracy. I'm not going to get into any conspiracy theories, but this is a democracy. The things in which our elected officials do must be transparent. Now, here's what you'll find, that the $720 billion inflation reduction bill was passed at a whopping 3:33 in the morning, was submitted to the House members. Hear this, at 11:15 the night before. The document itself was 1,900 pages. that was delivered to the House to be voted on at 11 and then passed at 3:33 in the morning, 4 hours later. Now, I know we got some people that can read pretty fast. This is going to place a tremendous amount of tax burden on normal, average, everyday families. That's me. I'm normal. I don't owe nobody, but I don't go out there and get stuff that I can't pay for. If I can't pay for it, then I look at it through the window. I imagine myself driving in a Bentley, but I can't afford a Bentley. Yeah, and I can't afford to live in River Oaks. That's not my lifestyle. So it's not for me to go and live beyond my means. I can't do that. So why do we allow other people to do that? And then that turns around and is placed on us. What about people who've never gone to college? What about people who's never graduated college? They are now, in turn, through taxes, going to have to pay the debt of somebody else, even though they themselves didn't go through it. Now, watch this. I'm finna hit you with something. How is he going to forgive $10,000 of anybody making under $125,000 a year and then $20,000 for those who've taken the Pell Grant? Well, you got to go all the way back to 2003 and find this little thing called the HERO Act of 2003. You got to go all the way back to 2003 for this particular act, because this is what the Biden administration is using to wipe away college debt. The HERO Act, for those who don't know, in 2001, when we were attacked, 9/11, when 9/11 happened, and you had all of this mass people that says, I'm joining the military. I want to go fight for my country. We've just been attacked on American soil. I'm getting ready to leave my job. I'm getting ready to join the service because I want to protect my country. And you had thousands upon thousands and even millions of people that joined the military and went to go fight in Iraq and Afghanistan and the such. Well, in 2003, President George Bush signed the HERO Act, which said that those military veterans that went to fight on behalf of their country and left their job, left their families and all of their ways of life to go and protect their country will be forgiven of their debt. So if they got into a place where they were over there in Afghanistan and their houses were not being able to be paid and they got foreclosed on or were getting ready to be foreclosed on, their cars got repossessed because they were fighting for their country at a time of crisis, President Bush signed what's called the HERO Act for veterans specifically. For veterans. So now he reaches all the way back to 2003 and takes the HERO Act and bring it all the way to 2022 and say, we're going to apply the HERO Act in getting rid of college debt. This would be a further strap of my wallet, lessening purchasing power and furthering the fuel for inflationary crisis. These numbers trickle down. Everybody, you got to tell me how Lindsey Graham of Texas, who makes a salary of $210,000, is worth $125 million. You got to tell me how Ilhan Omar, who is a Somali refugee, who is a representative out of Minnesota, is worth right now $3 million with $125,000 salary, and she's only been in office since 2019. You got to tell me how Alexandra Cortez, AOC, who was a former waitress at a bar, who is a representative of the House of Representatives in New York, is now worth a whopping $5.8 million with a $130,000 a year salary, by which she's only been in office since 2019. You got to tell me how Mitt Romney, who is a senator out of Utah, who has a yearly salary of $215,000, is worth $250 million. You got to tell me how Nancy Pelosi out of California has a $210,000 salary as the Speaker of the House of Representatives, but is worth a whopping $160 million. How does that work? Because when you're looking at these bills and you're looking at all of the stuff that is on the backside of the bill, it's in page 1,630. That's called pork. which lobbyists come and get lobbying fees to push certain agendas that are pushed inside of these bills. The administration proposed an increase in the base budget for the U.S. Department of Defense for the next fiscal year, totaling $1.5 billion. And the PIM, which is a Palladium Integrated Management System and Artillery Program. Shockingly, this administration wants to decrease the Army end strength to its lowest level in 1940, totaling with the Guard and Reserve at only 998,000, down from 1,010,500. Furthermore, we are forced to restore, now hear this, we are forced to restore the long-standing pro-abortion laws of 2023 by the omnibus funding package recently signed into law. So the Inflation Reduction Bill that just passed, the 720 Inflation Reduction Bill that just passed, in that bill is $400 million for Planned Parenthood. You tell me what Planned Parenthood has to do with reducing inflation. $400 million. Tucked neatly inside of that bill. It's all there. Additionally, his budget proposal calls for $400 million in increase for Title X funding that'll go towards other entities and performance abortion programs. Finally, while Americans, this is my little thing here. Finally, while Americans struggle to afford to fill their gas tanks, power their home because of the high energy costs, this administration has pushed our country farther away from energy independence. Now, you can talk about this all that you want, okay? All you need to do is pull up Alaska and ask yourself why we so dependent on oil. Alaska could fund the entire populace of America for the next 100 years. The oil reserves in Alaska for the next 100 years. We won't need our president going over to Saudi Arabia and shaking the prince, fist bumping the prince, and asking him to increase oil production to help with our supply and demand, because it's right up here to the north of us. So how are we doing this, everybody? This particular budget of fiscal year 2023 is adding $45 billion in new taxes on domestic energy production. Now, for those who don't know how offsetting costs work, just a real quick thing, real quick. The way that a business works is a business gets a product, finds somebody that can manufacture that product at the lowest cost. And then that company takes into consideration its cost of doing business, lights, building, employees, insurance, adds that cost on top of whatever that production cost is. That is what's called a flat line base. That's the minimum that it takes to push this mug out of a factory. But in order to keep pushing these mugs out of a factory, the factory then has to make money. It has to put a profit on top of the flat line base. It has to say we have to make money in order to keep buying materials, to keep purchasing these materials, to keep making these mugs. So they will put a cost of doing business on top of the flat line base. That is their profit. Typical profit for a company is anywhere between 10 and maybe around 30% on the super, super high end. Here's the problem with that. When taxes go up and what it takes now to make this mug goes up, everything goes up. So companies have to offset the cost to the consumer. So when the cost of diesel is going up at your at the gas pump, the 18-wheelers that bring the groceries to Kroger's, because that company has to pay more in diesel, they offset that cost by charging Kroger more. Kroger says, well, I have to offset that cost too. I have to charge Marcus more. So they're offsetting cost. So when all of this stuff starts to go up, you are going to feel it in your wallet. That's just the way that businesses work. There is no free money. There's no free money. There's no free money. This stuff is going to affect you. And why aren't we talking about this? Why are we not holding these people accountable? You can't spend money that you don't have. You will lose what you have if you don't pay for it. That applies to me. That applies to you. So why doesn't it apply for everybody else? Everybody, you ain't got to be an economist. You ain't got to be a financial advisor. You just got to be able to say 1 + 1 is 2. And if what I want costs $4, then I don't have enough to buy what I want. Therefore, I need to make an additional $2, or I need to say I don't need it. That is that's common sense. You're not going to be able to recognize this country in 20 years. You're going to go ask Venezuela. Go ask Cuba. Go ask them. Look at their economies. Look at what has happened when taxes and inflation, better yet, because I've been there over 20 times, look at Haiti. That's what happens when government gets overly corrupt, and government is always going to be corrupt. There's always going to be a baseline of corruption. I don't care whether you're Democrat, Republican, Independent, or whatever. There's always going to be a baseline of corruption. Always. That's just kind of par for the course. I think we all who are logical expect that to some degree. To some degree. But when you're talking about this kind of stuff here, that over the next 10 years, it's going to cost $73 trillion? 73 trillion? Look at your 401k. Look at your stocks. For the first time in 30 years. Now, if you've gone to France, if you've gone to England, the euro far outpaces the American dollar. Even though the American dollar is a world currency, that no matter where you go, the American dollar is accepted, the euro far outpaces the American dollar. Within the last, in 30 years, Steve is telling me no. Take $1 and go to euro. It's going to take 1.8 euros to equal your US dollar. For the first time in 30 years, and everybody listen, go to financial.gov. I'm not making this stuff up, y'all. Go to financial.gov and look at this. In the last 30 years, the euro has outpaced the US dollar by far. For the first time in 30 years, the euro is now step in step with the American dollar. For the first time in 30 years, the euro is now step in step with the US dollar. What does that mean? That means that when America sneezes, everybody else catches a cold. America is a world power. What happens here affects everybody else because everybody else is tentacled to America. So you're not just going to see the value of our dollar go down, which it is. That's called purchasing power. Look it up if you need to. That means the value of the dollar is no longer what it used to be. That's called purchasing power. I can't purchase with $100 the same thing that I could 5 years ago. That's called purchasing power. When our economy is affected, it affects everybody's economy. Everybody. Because everybody is tentacled to America. You think about this. When anybody else gets into a problem around the world, anybody gets into a problem, do they call London? Do they call France? Do they call Germany? Do they call Africa? Do they call Czechoslovakia? Do they call Czech Republic? Do they call Mexico? When Ukraine got into it like that, whose door were they knocking on? The president of Ukraine, when he did a Zoom call, whose Congress did he do a Zoom call with? He did it with our Congress. He didn't do it with France. He didn't do it with England. He didn't do it with Mexico. He knocked on America's door. America, we need your help. And that's what America is. It is a superpower that every other continent and country on the face of the planet is tentacled to. So when stuff starts happening in America, it affects everybody else. That's basic economy. Listen, if I lose my job, it's going to affect my wife and my 4 kids. No doubt about it. Because those 5 people are tentacled to me. I am the primary breadwinner. So if the money on my side gets affected, it affects my wife, it affects my son, it affects my 3 daughters. That's called a trickle-down effect. That's what that is. That's basic economy. So when America is spending money that it doesn't have and accumulating trillions of dollars in debt, and by the way, the number one debt that we owe and the number one person that we owe is China. China's got us by the China. And look at what China is getting ready to do to Taiwan. China's getting ready to do to Taiwan what Russia just did to Ukraine. And look at the bottom of your clothes. Look at the tag on your clothes and see where all the stuff that's in your house, see where it's produced. Taiwan. China's getting ready to swallow up Taiwan within the next 2 years. Think about what that's going to do to your cost of Levi's. This is a real problem. This is a real problem. Now, in all transparency, with my kids in college, my first daughter went through college with no debt. We paid that. I got my, who graduates in December, and then Markayla graduates in May. We got her 3 years in with no debt. Junior's a sophomore. I had to take out a loan on my 401k to finance my children's education. Hear this, that I have to pay back. I got to pay that back. That's what I got to do. And listen, when I took out the loan, I'm fully aware. It wasn't no, real fine print at the bottom. No, I was fully aware that I'm going to have to pay back this $50,000. I'm gonna have to pay that back. Fully aware of it. And with me being fully aware, I signed the papers because I know I'm gonna have to pay that back. But I want you to hear this. That's what responsible people do. If you owe a debt, pay it. If you owe somebody, pay them back. That's just responsibility. That's called adulting. I'm not looking for you to pay my mortgage, pay my car note. That's my debt. And I think the majority of Americans understand that. And while we may not be millionaires and billionaires and the such, I think that you have a large populace of Americans that operate their lives with integrity. And they do the best they can with what they have, making the ends meet, making the things work. I think at least the people that I know. And I think the majority of you, when you sit down at your kitchen table at night and you go through your financial portfolio and you look at this and you look at that and you're planning a family vacation and you say, well, baby, we want to do this, but if we do this per month, we can do this next summer. And you put a plan in place. Most people do that. If I'm getting ready to buy a house, I know it's going to be a certain percentage down. So I'm going to start saving that money now so that when I sign on the dotted line, I can also put the money down for the house. That's what responsible people do. So why are we not holding the same level of accountability to our elected officials? My kid's going to have to pay this back. Now, finally, I'm going to say this, everybody. I have said that I don't believe that college is for everybody. If you are doing a skill, medical, legal, engineering, a particular trade that requires specific training, I believe that college is absolutely applicable for you. But I do not believe that college is for everybody. I just don't believe that, especially in 2022 when we have such a mass amount of information flowing daily. Right. So I've often told my kids, and I've had this conversation with my kids, you're not just going to get a degree, but you're going to get a degree that is worth the paper that it's printed on. You're not going to get a degree in music. You're not going to get a degree in sociology. No, we're not doing that. No, we're not doing that. You don't need to go to college for that. You need to get a degree that is going to be worth its weight when you walk across that stage. Whether that's a medical degree, whether that's a technological degree, whether that's engineering, whether that's law, whatever that may be, that degree has to be worth something when you walk across the stage. not just sticking a paper on your wall saying that I completed it. No, I don't believe that. Because we're in a time right now to where a lot of information, if you want to get smart, there's a whole lot of free information that can come your way. So before we start sending our kids to college to rack up $100,000 worth of debt in 4 years, and they're 22 years old and they graduate with $100,000 in debt, let's examine the school and examine what they're going for. Let's have some real conversations. And maybe we need to start talking about these universities and saying, hey, why are you charging $30,000 a year when you got over 15,000 students on your campus? Sallie Mae, Fannie Mae have made a real good living off of a whole lot of people. And sometimes I don't believe that that is warranted for the monies that you're getting ready to spend for that particular education. I'm not disparaging education. You know too much about me to know that. I love education. I believe everybody should be educated, but I do not believe that everybody needs to attain the college level education in order to be quote unquote successful. There are many stories that can prove that. So as I close this up, everybody, as we talked about last week with Sister Sabrina Noble in finances, money is going to affect every single aspect of your life. From the time that you're born to the time that you die, money is going to affect every aspect of your life, every single day. Every single day. Money's going to have something to do with your life. You're going to make decisions based on what you have and based on what you don't. Every single day. Money is a very, very important part of our lives. And so because it's such an important part of our lives, we ought to educate ourselves about how money works so that we don't become a slave to it, so that money begins to work for us and we not working for money. Money is terribly important. It is not the end all to all. Okay, it's not. Okay, but it is terribly important. Peter came to Jesus and said, hey, Jesus, you know we got to pay taxes, right? What are we going to do? The temple taxes due. And I just came from the temple and they was talking about the temple taxes due. What are we going to do? Jesus didn't say, man, forget about that. We ain't finna pay no taxes. I'm Jesus. And we don't pay taxes. No, Jesus said, okay, I want you to go to the Sea of Galilee. I want you to throw your line out there. I want you to catch a fish. And when you pull this fish in, open up his mouth. They're going to be the coin that you're going to need to pay the temple tax with. Jesus paid his obligations. What he owed, he paid. He said, render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's, render unto God that which is God's. Protect your name, pay what you owe. I'm saying that this is a very common practice, and I just don't understand why people can't add. Like, I'm concerned about this. I am concerned about this out of control spending. Like, I have conversations with my wife and with my children, everybody, in full transparency. We can't afford that. We're not finna do that. We can skinny mix it and mix, but we're not finna do that. Because daddy ain't got a pot of the, rainbow. I don't have that. And guess what? I'm okay with that. Because I don't have bill collectors calling me. I'm not ducking calls. I live within my means. And I think this government should live within their means because we have to foot the bill. And you just imagine how hard you work. You just imagine what you got to do on a daily basis to make the money that you got to bring home to your family. Uncle Sam gets his money long before you do. You think about the kind of work that you put in, how hard it is to make a dollar. And then you ask yourself, do you want somebody dipping in your wallet after you don't work 40, 50, 60 hours a week to put that money in the bank to provide for you and your family and your way of life? I don't. So everybody go to .gov, go to financial.gov, look at the spending bill, look at what you see. It's all there. It's all there. Go to whitehouse.gov, look at the fiscal year for 2023, look at all of the stuff that's in it, and then ask yourself a question, why do we need it? That's all I've ever told you guys to do. I don't want you to take my word at face value. Everybody, listen, I'm a flawed individual, but I do want you to do your own research. Before you call me crazy, do your research. Like, do your research. You can figure out the same stuff that I'm talking about right now on this podcast. It's on my iPad the same way it's on your iPhone or iPad. Same information that I just read is available to you. Exact same information. C-SPAN is on your cable box too. You can watch the hearings, you can watch the debates, you can watch it all in real time. It's on your cable box the same way it's on mine. So before you start hold these people accountable. So everybody, in Jesus' name, we got to rein in this spending, man. We got to rein this spending in. I've worked hard, and I want to. You know, the old saying is that you work 40 years to retire and live good for 10, and then you die. It's a sad reality. It's a sad reality that you got to wait until you're 65 to kind of roll off into the sunset and enjoy life after you put in 40 years of living, so that you only get to really enjoy 10 years of what you've been able to accumulate. I am trying my best to break that model. I want to be able to experience stuff while my bones are good, while I'm in the right capacity of my mind. I don't have author in my fingers, and me and mama can go and do some things after we have sacrificed and did what we needed to do. And I believe that God wants us to honor that and pay our debts. And so everybody, I want to thank you for joining us here on the set of Studio B. Finances. Remember, wherever you're watching us from, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, like, follow, comment, subscribe, get into the comments, get all into those comments, and let's talk about it. Let's have a discussion about it. Let's tell me what you think about it, what you think about what we talked about today. And on any podcast, your opinions, your thoughts are very much welcomed, all in them comment box. So everybody, I want to thank you. Continue to look out for some good stuff coming up. Next week after next, I got two very, very good guests that I think you're really going to enjoy. Husband and wife team that are going to be right here on the set. So I think you're really going to enjoy their story and what they got to offer and what God has allowed them to bring them through. It will encourage you to endure and to keep your eyes focused on the prize. But remember, be informed, be empowered. Be informed, be empowered. You're empowered when you have knowledge. You can live life better when you have the proper knowledge. So everybody, we'll see you next week on Studio B. Be safe. God loves you.